Hello everyone, welcome to our last workshop of the Developer Challenge 2024. This event has live translations, so the link to access them will be sent here in the chat, along with the link to send your questions that will be answered at the end of the workshop. Now, I'll hand it off to EvilArtist to talk about 3D modeling.
Hello, I'm Vivian, also known as EvilArtist on the platform. If you know me, hi, and thank you for joining me today. So, about me, I've been on Roblox for 12 years, and I've been a 3D artist for 5 years now. Here are some of the games and events I've 3D modeled for in the last few years. One of the main projects I worked on was Mermaid Life as an accelerator in 2019. I created UGC and in-game 3D models and textures for the Metaverse Champions Hub, Ready Player 2 Hub, Innovation Award Hub, and the award show from late last year. Currently, I'm working as an artist at Full Flower Studio, and I freelance 3D models and art occasionally. Today, I am a 3D artist. Tomorrow, I am a public speaker. So if I begin to slur my words or I speak in a funky way, I'm working on it. So let's move into the workshop. So to start, I want to give you all an overview of why 3D modeling can help your game stand out. If you come from a background of building directly in studio with parts and unions and wedges, then I hope that this is a great opportunity to start learning 3D. With that being said, I want to present this workshop for those of you who are semi-fluent in Blender. Say you started using it a bit, but maybe didn't keep going. I couldn't or couldn't find any resources. This workshop is for y'all. If you're new to Blender entirely, I linked a video that I personally learned a lot from and I think is great for beginners. Either way, my biggest goal today is that you hopefully want to pick up Blender yourself and get started on this wonderful world of 3D. So moving forward with this slide, I outlined a few reasons why 3D is a great form of creating on Roblox. You can create a variety of objects from pre-made primitive shapes. So reusability comes in handy during game jams, especially when it's part of your theme or direction. You can use PBR on low poly meshes to give them depth. On the right is an example of how a low poly mesh with a high quality or colorful texture can make it look more complex to the eye. You can combine meshes together externally and import them together to create a single draw call to avoid having a lot of information in your scene. You can see that on the right with a screenshot from the Metaverse Champions Hub, those plants highlighted very aggressively in blue are combined into a single mesh. So as a side note, when you're looking for 3D modeling videos to help you learn, it's really helpful to seek out game developer videos. They go more in depth on certain features of 3D that pertain more to Roblox. Searching for terms like low poly, game ready asset, and 3D game art are all great terms to look for in a title when you're looking for tutorials. There are even Roblox specific video creators that teach some great fundamentals like Row Builder. I wanted to add this slide because you can encounter advanced 3D modeling videos that are for renders and for short films. And while I think they're 100% useful to learn from, they also don't keep try counts in mind when creating, since they're not going into a game. If you want players to run your games, you want to keep in mind optimization. Okay, so here is the outline for today's workshop. We'll be going through 3 game changers in creating 3D models for your games, both for game jamming, but also for future reference. First is efficiency, finding your footing, knowing what the answer is to where do I start. Second goal is to go over tooling. What are some tools and tips in the 3D modeling program Blender that can help you move quicker and make things efficiently? Third goal is prioritizing. We want all of our best work to make it into the game. We've also got to make sure the game can run. So we'll go through some optimization information there. All of these sections will have information in depth and simple tutorials. And the plan is to release this workshop and PDF after this so you can view it at any point in case you missed anything here. Okay, so starting off with efficiency. We'll get to the bread and butter of 3D soon, I promise. But if the question is, where do I start? Here are some things to go over. Before you begin modeling, you'll probably want to establish the art style you're going towards. There's a ton of different asset styles you can choose from, but you want to make sure you start and end with assets that look like they belong in the same universe. The second point to efficiency is asset reusability. This is for when you do start modeling and you have some starter pieces that you can reuse over and over. Third and final point to efficiency is using references. Your memory can be deceiving, and instead of putting time and effort into something that doesn't end up looking quite right, you can instead find a solid reference to make the thing you want to make. So 3D art direction can look like a lot of things. You can mix together images to create mood boards of what you want to achieve. You can draw some concepts for you and your team to have a clear vision of what you want to move forward with, or both. The goal is to have some preparation beforehand. Building a framework like this one can help to condense all your thoughts to confidently achieve all of the 3D modeling work you want to get done. You can put as much or as little information that you need in your new mood boards. It also helps to put notes next to certain images so you know what you want from them. In this example here, I did use PureRef, the application on your PC. That's pretty good for taking these kinds of mood boards. Another note, when you are putting together references from different sources, keep in mind that your final product should reflect your own work. These images are for referencing, something to look at for inspiration to create another piece, basically, that's brand new. So direct one-to-one copying of others' concepts without permission isn't the best approach and can get you into trouble. So that's why your own concepts can help at this stage. So make something brand new and true to you. For a short game jam like this one, you'll probably want to stick to a simple style or a style that you're fondly used to. Here's more examples of how having concepts can visualize what you need first. I was able to visualize what I wanted to be made before it was made. That made the process of going back and forth much easier to handle. So overscoping and feature creep. You'll want to make sure your 3D is achievable in a short amount of time. Keep that in mind, and if there's any idea you really want to do, but you know it's too complicated or too vast, make a feature creep section away from your eyes. If you have time for it, think about it and try it. If you don't have time for it, at least you're glad you didn't start and you couldn't finish. So asset reusability. If you know you're going to be using a lot of a simple object, a great use of time is making some reusable assets. For me and my most recent game development project, I needed sticks, stones, and logs constantly to build things made out of sticks, stones, and logs. Once I created my first stick, I kept a copy of it to duplicate it and twist it and scale it later on. I was able to keep the style consistent all throughout 3D modeling, every 3D model I made for this game. So asset reusability can range from terrain pieces, clusters of plants or trees, and other objects that require a lot of one thing. It's especially handy when you've already finished UV mapping an object and you don't want to spend time UVing another that is exactly the same. Using references, when you're working on something that you're not quite sure about, it's great to find a reference for the exact shape you're trying to create. You can use stock image references when you're not sure what the silhouette of an object you're working on looks like. Don't get stuck on something for hours if you can help it. Here's a tutorial on how you can 3D model this way. I've linked it on this slide. Again, later on you can view this as you please, but that is the title in case you do want to look it up. in this image, you can see a preview of what that might entail. So I'll be moving on to tooling. Talking about efficiency is far from over. So let's talk about speeding up your workflow in Blender using pivot points, modifiers, and some hotkeys you can use. Okay, the pivot point menu is helpful for shifting things where you want them to be by using the different pivot points to do so efficiently. On the left, the active element pivot point helps you rotate meshes from your desired vertice. On the right, the 3D cursor allows you to rotate from a center point wherever you want that center point to be. There are other pivot point options in this menu besides the default, which is median point. Try finding out what they all lead to. Here is a modifier combo that I love to use a lot, the array modifier and the curve modifier. I use this when I need an object to repeat itself over and over around a shape, like ruffles on a shirt or a bag. You'll want to start by creating your desired shape one time and adding an array modifier to that object. Then you'll want to make a curve out of vertices or from a curve that's already made, and you'll convert it to a curve if it's not already a curve. Continuing from last slide, to the first mesh, you'll add a curve modifier next to that array modifier. Attach the curve in the curve object dropdown. You can mess with the scaling and placement using G with Y or Z. I never have it right the first time, so it takes a minute to mess with it. You can mess with the direction that the array is facing by using Control T. That's the middle image there. After that, you can convert the arrayed mesh object to a mesh using Alt-C again, or apply the modifiers, and you are done. By the way, after you make the initial shape from the slide before, you'll probably want to UV your shape too, so you can reuse a simple texture to it. I can get to it later too. So here's, in this slide, I want to highlight how models can sometimes feel complicated to create. There's a ton of different methods to modeling, and one of those is sculpting an entire piece from scratch. If you watch tutorials like that to start, I'm sorry, because I also did that, and it was a lot. But here's a different construction method that is more straightforward. Make one thing at a time, combine them together by the end using Control J. Okay, here are some hotkeys that I love to use. Control R, you can add a loop cut to the center of your object or any part of your object that has a quad in it. It's useful to add topology without subdividing the entire mesh. Control E has a ton of stuff. You just press that whenever you want to open up the menu, and it'll show you. You can make a seam with it. You can mark a sharp with it. You can set the flow, which is pretty fun to do. It kind of makes things really relaxed, I think. You can press E to extrude outwards and inwards on the bottom left GIF I share. You can press E and you can shift it around, rotate it, and there you have a little chain. Solidify also works in this case too. Continuing on from hotkeys, another one is Control A in object mode. I apply all transforms, and that's a good habit to do before importing to Roblox. Alt S is a good one. So instead of sizing proportionally outwards, it like fattens or flattens the shape, as you can see in the GIF on the right. And the worst one you'll probably ever learn, I learned it right away for no good reason, is Control Shift Alt C. So that will move your pivot point back to the center or center it around your mesh. And then after that, you can press Control A and you can import, and everything that you ever spawn into Roblox will be at 0, 0, 0. So let's continue the trend of speeding up your workflow with different UVing methods for different occasions and texturing workflows. So this is the UV workflow I used to use more often when I was drawing plants or flowers. I would make the basic shape that would encapsulate the drawing and UV it using project from view. So you can see there, that's what I did there. Another great use of project from view is using it with gradient sheets. Let the mesh be complicated while you just add one texture to the entire thing made of gradients or flat colors. Bottom right, you can see the condiments and the cheese is projected from view. Another UV workflow method is default unwrap and with using seams. This method of unwrapping is the most efficient and fast way if you plan to use something like Substance Painter, or even if you're going to use Roblox Material Service. The goal is to hide the seaming as much as possible. So in this example, I put the seam where the middle of the legs meet. If you were doing a rock, you'd probably want to put the seam on the bottom of the rock where people won't be able to view it. You'll usually always have seams since they're really hard to avoid entirely, but this method is great for complex assets that have a lot of detail. Next one is active quads. And I use this method when I have meshes that have a repeating pattern along the whole edge or length of them. This is how people make hair or any mesh that has quads, which are four vertices when they make a face. Four vertices make a face. The process can look a little complicated, but after repeating it over and over, you'll absolutely get the hang of it. Making sure your mesh has a seam first. You start by unwrapping the mesh using unwrap. You select one edge of a quad in the UV editor. You can see that in the bottom middle image. And using W to open the UV context menu, you'll align all sides of a quad until it becomes a perfect square or rectangle. After that, you'll want to select the entire mesh and make sure your the quad you made into a straight square is highlighted like the image in the middle. Hit U on your keyboard and press follow active quads. From there, you'll have a straight set of quads that you can place on your texture to create a repeating pattern. So using the workflows above, you can combine different texture methods to maximize how much information you fit into the texture sheet or image. As you can see here, I put unwrap seams for the top piece of this staff. I used active quads in like the parts that are obviously cylinder, and I wanted to project from view that circle down there because it was easier to draw it. Texturing workflows. After UV mapping, you'll have to worry about what texture method to move forward with. Just like UV unwrapping, you can move forward with different methods depending if you're making hero assets or foliage or small props. So Vertex Paint and Roblox materials. This one's really good. I want to provide some texturing workflows that are helpful for creating fast assets. This one doesn't require texturing at all and uses Roblox materials. With Vertex Paint, you can create stronger shadows that show up in Studio, and these can give your assets more depth. You can see the difference between the vase without any added Vertex Paint versus the one with it added as shadows. While selecting your object, you want to go into Vertex Paint mode. From there, you'll click on the Vertex Selection button marked by the white arrow. It should turn blue when it is selected. And you go into edit mode and select some edges and vertices that you want to change the color of. Go back into Vertex Paint mode, find the color you want. For me, it would be dark gray. Hit Shift K to color all the vertices you have selected. To make it easier, for demonstration purposes, by the way, I'm using a matte cap that is brown. Use black and white when using Vertex Paint, aka the grayscale palette, to get the effect of deeper shadows. The button next to Vertex Selection, that's the face button. It works the exact same way as the Vertex button, except it's for faces. So if you have an entire face you want to cover in a single color instead of a gradient, you can use that. Gradient texture images. Let's go. This texturing method is probably the most straightforward. Here, I created a combination of gradients that I'd find useful in my game, and I simply UV my pieces using Project from View. This is my go-to for game jam meshes. On the bottom 3 images, I use a plane, and I carved out the shape of leaves using the knife tool. Then I projected each leaf shape by using Project from View while selecting those faces, and I gave them different variations of green. So, drawn or baked textures on plane. This one can be time consuming since you're adding drawing and painting into the equation, but the tutorial outlined earlier in slide 4 is a great way to learn if you're new to 3D painting. This one is shown as only being for planes, but you can texture 3D meshes this way too. Okay, the final goal of today's workshop is prioritizing, making sure that the objects you made are in limits of the Roblox engine, getting your meshes in for the rest of your team, and optimizing the number of meshes you import so that your game doesn't lag over time. So this is a game jam. The goal is to have as much stuff finished before the clock runs out. For optimization, you want to combine meshes together before importing if there will be a lot in a single area. You can use this for custom grass or clusters of plants and fruits that are all sharing the same general location. Before importing, you'll want to remove the materials you used in Blender so that in Studio, you can reuse texture IDs where you can. This is going to lessen the amount of memory you use by making sure that you're not accidentally uploading duplicate textures, which all count as unique draw calls. And if you're wondering what draw calls are, you should look into some optimization documentation put together by Mr. Chicken Rocket. You know, quoting Mr. Chicken Rocket himself, draw calls and triangles both tend to affect performance linearly. Having too many of either tends to be the primary performance bottleneck for Roblox games. So from his documentation, his current advice is to aim for these budget numbers. You want to have graphics mode 10. You want to have 500 or less draw calls in a scene that you're currently looking at. 500,000 or less triangles. I really recommend checking out the rest of his work. It's pretty good. I learned a lot from it too, and he is constantly uploading it, updating it, I think. So it's really good. Again, prioritizing. Let's go continue talking about prioritizing. I want to outline some steps to follow before and after importing. Again, you want to remove textures from your meshes before you import them. You know that one. You do also know Control A, apply all transforms before you import it to Roblox. It'll make it so that you're always at like 0, 0, 0. FBX unit scale is one that I think a lot of people don't know, but are starting to realize. Instead of setting the scale to 0.01 and having the apply scalings be all local, you can leave the scale to you can leave the scale to 1.0, and you can use FBX unit scale instead, and that'll do the exact same thing. Steps after importing. You want to import using the asset manager if you're importing a lot of things. So you made a batch of 3D models and you want to import them at once. That's good for that. You want to anchor everything that you make as soon as you import it, unless you're making a physics game. Make this your bread and butter. You want to change the render fidelity to automatic if Roblox, it'll help you, like, if things are very far away, it will automatically re-render it to be a little more low poly, and it'll save you a lot of data in the future, I think. The Roblox triangle limit is 10K, but try keeping your simplest props under 2K or 4K tries. This raft that I made here is made out of 1,944 triangles, and that's about 1,200 vertices. That's a good limit to set yourself on. So I want to go over some troubleshooting things too. Roblox triangulates your meshes, but if there's basically two faces that are too close together. When it triangulates, the mesh can't figure out what the heck is going on. So over time, you'll learn to create cleaner and cleaner meshes. But for the time being, to fix this, if you want to make sure, you'll want to make sure two or more connected vertices aren't too close together on your mesh. For inside-out meshes, before importing, you want to review that there are no faces unintentionally facing the wrong way. You can check by going to the Viewport Overlays dropdown, the top image, and turning on face orientation. This will make your meshes blue if the faces are all correctly facing outwards. If there are red faces, that means they're inverted. To fix this, go to edit mode, click on the mesh dropdown, go down to normals, and press recalculate outside while you have your entire mesh selected. This should fix the issue, but if it's still wonky, just try flipping them over individually with the menu option flip. Okay, here are some helpful plugins too. The asset previewer is great for when you have a ton of assets in replicated storage and you don't want to go through all of them. They preview meshes, textures, and particle emitters, and animations too. I think that was fixed recently. The local file importer, this one's really good when you want to test out textures and images without needing to upload them yet. And the Meshbox version 1.0. If you use parts, I'm sure you've heard of the Part to Terrain plugin. Meshbox by Tyridge is helpful for when you don't want to mess with the terrain editor too much. If you instead want to make mesh terrain pieces by sculpting or modeling them, but you still want the look of voxel terrain and its textures, you can use this plugin to transform your meshes into terrain. And that is a wrap. That's all. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, EvilArtist, for the incredible presentation. Now let's move to the questions. We already have a few ones. So the first one is, how long have you been modeling?
I've been modeling for 5 years now, since 2019. It's been very fun since then. I was an artist before that, and I had a lot of trouble making stuff that I really wanted to make, and then 3D modeling was a whole new experience.
Nice. And the second one is, if you could upload your last UGC today, what would it be and why?
Can you repeat that one?
If you could upload your last UGC item today, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I've made so many things that are related to strawberries, but that was still the first thing that came to my mind. I don't know. That's a very complicated question. Something strawberry related. I want to give everybody my last strawberry.
The next one is, what would your perfect model be like, and what properties would it have?
Let's see. I love to use gradient images a lot. If I could have a sheet that is 1024 by 1024 and it could have like every single gradient and color in the world, that would be so helpful for my game development. But until then, I have to make my own gradient sheets, and every model will probably just have to use gradient sheets like that.
Nice. And the next one is, I heard that the asset manager is good to use for applying texture to our models, but how do you use it, and is it necessary for applying textures?
It is not necessary. You can import textures exactly the same way. If you export everything, all your models into one FBX, you can import that FBX using the asset manager, and it'll import every single model you have in that FBX. If you have a folder and you have the XBX in there, and you have all your textures in there too, you can grab all of them in your folder right then, put it into the asset manager, and you'll have every single thing you want uploaded at one time. So that's really helpful. Another way you can import meshes, of course, is using mesh parts. You just right click and import the mesh part. That's if you only have one mesh to import. But The asset manager also just helps you make sure that your scaling is correctly set. Make sure that you don't have any faces that flip the wrong way. It's super helpful all around.
Awesome. Next one is, let's say we want a texture that is gradient between blue and green. Do we have to use Substance Painter to create it?
Absolutely not. You can use a gradient sheet, or you can use, what other one do I have here? You can use vertex painting. That vertex painting is really interesting. I only showcased the black and white grayscale version, but you can very well put any color you want on there, and it'll just translate over to Roblox, and it does not use a texture at all. It is absolutely just a property of a mesh. Um, so if you used a combination of both, for example, you used like a green as a shadow color, and then in Roblox you put the color 3 information as a blue, that green would still be visible above the blue, and it'd be like a really pretty gradient probably.
Thank you. And our last question. Out of all the modeling and texturing projects you've been involved in, could you pinpoint your favorite for texturing and modeling? Also, why?
Ooh, this one has probably got to go to Zara Larson. I made some faces for that, but more so, I made this like rhubarb peacock set and a bunch of other stuff like for that. That was really fun. That was honestly the last time I probably used drawing as my main form of texturing. So I am very fond of that time. Since then, I've been using Substance Painter, and I've been challenging myself to only use Substance Painter just so I can learn as much as possible, even if everything kind of looks ugly to start. But I think I'm getting there. It's been a year, so pretty proud of that.
Thank you, guys. So that's a wrap. Thank you again, EvilArtist, and everyone who joined the event. The Developer Challenge will start on next Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific time with the team announcement on the forum. So stay tuned. Good luck and have fun, everyone.
Good luck,
See you there.
everybody. Have fun.
Bye bye.